here. He's founder and global CEO of Prime Focus. Namit, thank you for joining us. It's great to meet you. So get right up to that microphone and tell us what Prime Focus does. You're in Hollywood, so I think it's got to be something to do with movies.
Yeah, I think we actually are an end-to-end services company, servicing the film, broadcast, and the commercials industries across various continents in the world. We're set up in North America, in London, and all across India.
That's one thing we're learning. Kirk's telling us is broadcasting is growing worldwide, globally, because these local TV stations now are no longer government run. There's a whole sudden, explosion of privately owned stations all over the world. That's exciting. Yeah. So tell me, when you say services, what services do you provide?
So we provide, going back right in '95 when we started, we were a garage startup with an offline edit system for the television business. And since then, we've grown to be an integrated service provider, which means that we do from capture, which is providing cameras on set, all the way through all post services from visual effects, color correction, audio post-production, 2D to 3D conversion, digital content management. Wow. We do just about everything from a services perspective, from a soup to nuts.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. One of the reasons I wanted Namit on the show was Prime Focus was chosen by Lucasfilm to convert Star Wars from 2D to 3D.
Oh, you didn't mention that. That kind of plum gig.
That's a plum.
Save the best for last.
Yeah. So tell us about that. That's interesting.
So we've been obviously we've been growing very well on the. We've been a visual effects company. We also worked on Avatar on the visual effects.
Oh, okay.
And since then we've built our own 3D technology and a 3D pipeline for converting content from 2D to 3D. And over the last 1 year, since the explosion on 3D has happened, we've been part of that revolution, and in fact leading it from the front. We, like all other vendors in the world, tested on, Star Wars, which is clearly the most prestigious project out there.
Yeah.
And clearly Lucasfilm ran through ILM, very, very extensive testing, and made sure that they got exactly what they wanted, and companies that were set up to service them. And I think we qualified on that, and here we are on the first Star Wars, which looks fantastic.
That's great. And 15 years ago, you were in a garage.
Yes.
That's really awesome. That must be pretty exciting. Probably watching Star Wars movies while you were working and studying.
Yeah, exactly. I was actually, I mentioned to Mr. Lucas, I said, back in school, I actually bought a book on ILM just to see Jurassic Park and how, how beautifully films were made and how they even visualized that. Back in India, it was a very, very big deal.
Isn't that great?
Today to be working on Star Wars, I think, is a dream come true.
That's so cool. So how do you convert a 2D movie, one shot in 1977, in fact, into a 3D? Or you're not going to do
they're doing episode 1
You're going to start with 1. Oh, good. Thank goodness. All right. Was 1 mostly shot digital? I think it was, wasn't it?
Yes,
So you have digital masters that you're working with.
I think all movies have digital masters today.
Okay.
Because
they're converted.
They're all set up from a digital color correction perspective anyway.
Right.
And so digital masters are available for even much, much older films. And we're so we just got the digital files, and we set up the entire pipeline based on how the technology operates. Where you set up the depth, and you sort of start to create the sense of 3D around every object.
Now there are ways to convert 2D to 3D, and then there are ways, and we've seen examples of really well done conversions and really poorly done conversions.
Sure.
Can you distinguish? What makes a good conversion? How do you get a good conversion versus a bad one?
I think some basic fundamentals that play to 3D generally. I think it's the language of 3D more than just conversion, because there are some kinds of shows that lend themselves very well, right from the way they are cut. Because if you have high-paced cuts, quick cuts, that's not ideal for 3D because you don't even register it, and it can be quite disturbing. On the other end, on the creative end, there obviously has to be a very, sensitive approach towards knowing the kind of language you want to sort of create for the consumer experience, and the amount of time, money, and creative artistry that needs to be there has to be sufficient. Otherwise, you're not going to get a good conversion.
So it's not merely technology. So do you have somebody like George sitting there saying, "Okay, I want that moving back. I want that moving forward"?
I think not him personally directly.
I think he's busy.
But his associates, obviously, he's got ILM.
So they sit there, and is it Z depth that you're adding? I mean, do they say here put a little more Z depth there, a little less there?
I think yes, there is a pass as we call depth creation, where depth has to be added into the scene, and then more than just adding depth, it's about creating the sense of 3D, which has to be volume around every object. So you start to feel like there is a certain depth to that particular individual.
Because I always think of the Z depth as what 3D is, but you're saying adding volume.
Exactly.
Do you do that with lighting? How do you do that?
No, so there are specific tools that have been created that facilitate that, and that becomes a very key part of. So it's about adding depth and the relevant distance between all objects.
Yep.
And then it's about creating the right amount of volume so they look real and they look like.
Otherwise, it's like flat pieces of paper on.
Exactly. And that is in 3D then.
And that's tricky to do, I'm sure, to add that because that information isn't there.
Sure.
Does that involve creating models of some of the objects?
So different companies have different pipelines set up for that. I think. Some people use models, some people use other tools that are available as part of the visual effects tool set that we typically have evolved from. So we have lots of tools that have been written over the years because we have been doing lots of visual effects. And there's some of this that is part and parcel of our overall pipeline anyways.
Very interesting. So you're not going to tell us?
I'm not supposed to.
That's the secret sauce, obviously.
Exactly right.
Wow.
But of course, to do it right takes more time and more money.
That's true, and it needs to be very carefully measured. So because you're basically creating something that isn't there, and you want to make it believable. So that's clearly needs a certain amount of time and effort. Without which you're not going to get the desired effect.
Somebody in the chat room said, "Make Jar Jar Binks' tongue scoot out of the audience."
Actually, another person in the chat room said, "Can you just make Jar Jar behind everything?" But that's a personal opinion. Not everybody hates Jar Jar Binks. It must be fun though to be working on this
absolutely.
Project. Are you going to get to do some of it yourself, or you have to let your minions do the job?
No, I think I'm not qualified for that.
Yeah, it's pretty specialized. You can't learn that. I mean, this is a brand new science.
It is an artistic approach towards the process.
It's art and science, I would say.
I imagine so. Yeah,
because you have to have some measure of judgment as to what's looking good and what's in front of what else, and so on and so forth.
How long is this going to take? Do you have an estimate?
Actually, on episode 1, we're almost through. We're from our end,
that's very quick. Well, you've been working secretly on this for years.
You've been doing 3D for years. It predates the current excitement about 3D, right?
I wouldn't say that long, but I think Lucasfilm obviously has been running their research, and ILM has been doing their own research for a very long time.
Right.
And they've been adding their tools, and the right approach towards 3D, I think, they've been sort of evaluating that over the years, and I think when they sort of got to that point of, that okay, now we're ready, then we came on board, which is now almost 8-9 months ago. To sort of.
Well, that's a pretty quick process, though. 8 or 9 months to get this job done.
So when is the movie going to be released?
I think from what we hear, it's February 2012.
Wow, quick turnaround.
Yeah.
And is it now when it comes out? It has to come out on Blu-ray, I would guess. Yes.
Well, theatrical first.
It's theatrical.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't understand.
Yeah,
so February they're going to re-release it theatrical.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Wow. That sounds very cool. Sounds like a lot of fun.
It really does sound like a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Kirk, you have any? Look, he's looking at Star Wars 1.
This in 3D.
Yeah, the chariot race.
Yeah.
Amazing. That must have been fun to work on.
Oh, absolutely.
Wow, going around corners.
Jabba the Hutt in 3D.
Ooh, I don't know about that. But on the other hand, Princess Leia, slave outfit 3D.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, say no more.
Now,
no more.
Are you booked for future projects, or is this like a one thing at a time here?
So we also worked on Narnia. That came out in December. That was very well received as well.
Mm-hmm.
So there are several films that are now going down the 3D route, and we are clearly playing a fairly active role on that side.
James Cameron and others have been very critical of 2D movies converted to 3D. Obviously, it's the only way we're going to get episode 1 in 3D. But he says always better to start from scratch. You agree that better to shoot from scratch in 3D? Or
in fact, I don't really think it's conversion or shoot is actually the solution. In fact, what we are starting to do right now is we actually recommend, depending on the kind of movie you make, the kind of scenes you have, what's best achieved on both on both different formats. You may theoretically say you're shooting in 3D, but actually what you're doing is just shooting a second eye.
Right.
And you're still setting up mechanical rigs that have,
Right.
which are susceptible to huge failure themselves. So it's not a perfect science on shoot. On the conversion end, I think the tools that are being created and the sophistication that is being brought is, I think, significantly going to be ahead of the curve as far as the quality is concerned.
Do you think people will actually do 3D movies this way then instead of shooting them 3D?
Yeah, because, see, when we say we're shooting 3D, we're not really, there's no real 3D.
You're just adding information.
It's just adding information.
You know,
I think,
you'd probably prefer to have that information, though, in the conversion process.
so if you it's good to shoot, knowing that your film is going to be in 3D is better than shooting in 3D.
Because you'll have more information.
You'll have more information, you'll take certain shots, you'll cut
it.
the film in a certain way. It'll lend itself to a more, comfortable viewing experience for
Is this
for the
what
audiences.
James Cameron and Vince Pace were talking about yesterday, where they were saying, we want to make it possible to shoot 2D, 3D, 4K, 60 frame all at once.
Sure.
So it's all enabled, and then the filmmaker has these choices, not just the day they release the movie, but down the road later as well. They have that information.
Exactly.
They have that, and I think for what is being shot out there, I think there's no real basis to sort of say one is better than the other.
Right.
The question is, it just comes down to the aesthetic and the understanding amongst filmmakers, because shooting 3D is equally complicated. It's not as simple as
Right. You can
just setting
screw
up
it
a
up
second
bad.
camera, and you can
You can do a really bad job.
And I think what Mr. Cameron has been more critical of, which is right, that is, it's the approach towards the conversion. Just because you're converting it, it doesn't mean you take it and do a rush job, or you just ignore
Clash of
all
the Titans. I'm sorry.
ignore all of the other things that are critical to the whole process.
Right. You didn't do Clash of the Titans.
We did.
You did.
Yeah.
There was some criticism of that conversion.
Yes, there was.
Yeah, but you feel like you've gotten better, or
I think.
was it a lack of?
I don't think the criticism was, again, of what we.
It wasn't your
what
technology.
we
It was
did.
the artistic choices that were made.
And I think the general issue was that it was an afterthought, which was
Exactly.
probably what was.
They didn't shoot it with that in mind.
Right.
But for us,
But they didn't shoot episode 4 with that in mind either, did they? I mean,
I think films like Star Wars, I think, have lent themselves to the 3D world,
Yeah.
generally speaking.
there's so much CGI for
There's
one
so much
thing.
CGI. There's
Yeah.
so much of.
So you do. I mean, in all the CGI, you have volumetric information, don't you?
You'd have on most new films. I
Yeah.
think all the films that are in the libraries don't necessarily have them archived in the formats that are
Right.
relevant today. So
You couldn't go back to, say, episode 4 and say, I want the models for the CGI. They've thrown that stuff away. You
I
have
don't
to
thi-
work from the film.
I don't think they've thrown that away. I'm not sure how much CGI existed during episode 4, because
Oh,
that was,
okay.
It was all
that
models.
was
It
in
was all physical
1975.
models.
Those were
probably.
physical models.
You're
which were-
kidding. Not episode 4. I'm sorry. I should
Yeah,
have said
episode
episode 1.
one.
The one you're working on.
Sure.
I'm so bad at this. I almost called it Star Trek. So just please
Watch out there.
forgive me. In episode 1, do you still have the original digital models and so forth? Are you able to use those?
I think we didn't necessarily need.
You didn't need them.
We didn't need those specifically. I think because the way the depth was set up, we knew from the word go, that we'd be able to do it
Right.
without that specifically.
Although even the plastic models in episode 4, I mean, they're 3D
Yeah.
in the sense that
They're
they're
physical
real
objects,
models.
yeah.
So there's some information
Right.
there. Very interesting. Well, it's so nice to meet you, Namit. What an exciting project you're getting to work on.
Thank you.
Yeah, really fun. Do you have
Thanks
any
so
other
much.
questions for him, Scott?
No, I think
Take him away from you.
No, it's a fascinating thing, and I'm really glad you were able to come join us.
Yeah. And
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
yeah, I'm watching the chat room. They're very interested. Yeah, not all of them are broadcast geeks. Everybody's interested in this kind of stuff. Thank you, Namit.
I think every American and every person in the world who loves movies loves Star Wars. I think.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty safe bet.
Yep.
You're getting to work on the best.
Yep.
Namit Malhotra is a founder and global CEO. Started in a garage, prime focus, and now working on Star Wars Episode 1. Thank you, Scott, for the prompting.
Which was not the first episode.
3D.
It was the
Well,
fourth
that's
episode.
hence my confusion.
Yes, it is confusing.
It's yeah, he shot him out of order.
yeah.
Right? No big deal. Thank you, Namit.
They'll fix it in
That's
post.
great. Great to meet you. Thanks, Scott, for bringing Namit by. That's